interesting developments last week in the state of Maryland. Senator Barbara Mikulski has announced that she will not be running for re-election. The races on to replace her, two of the leading candidates, are U.S. Representatives Chris Van Hollen and Donna Edwards of Baltimore, a favorite of progressives and candidly of ourselves. Now, Van Hollen does have the backing of a number of party leaders, including Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid. Edwards has the backing of a number of progressive groups. They are both going at it. Van Hollen, by the way, I should say, is fairly progressive on a number of issues. He is not by any means a right-wing or corporate demon, but Chris Van Hollen has a problem. Chris Van Hollen, Representative Van Hollen, was an outspoken supporter of the Simpson-Bowles plan. If you remember the Simpson-Bowles plan, that was a proposal drawn up by the two co-chairs of a presidential commission on federal deficits and Social Security. When the commission they chaired failed to agree on recommendations, which I would argue was a leadership failure on their part, Alan Simpson and Erskine Bowles issued their own. Now, their plan was very popular among Washington insiders, wealthy corporations and individuals, and that Hydra-headed network of organizations funded by billionaire anti-entitlements hedge funder P. Peterson. Now, you've heard of some of them: Fix the Debt, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. They're all the same people with the same money, P. Peterson's money. Now, the Simpson-Bowles plan was, however, notably unpopular with the public, according to polls. Most voters rejected its strategy of cutting Medicare and Social Security and lowering taxes for corporations and high-income earners. Now, Van Hollen was one of the plan's strongest Democratic advocates. In 2012, he spoke in favor of it all over the place. And now, when Donna Edwards declared herself, she clearly considered, for the Senate seat that is, she clearly considered Chris Van Hollen the person to run against. She quickly drew a contrast in her video announcing her candidacy, saying that she has a record of, and I quote Donna Edwards, standing up to anyone who would compromise away Social Security and Medicare. No ifs, ands, buts, or willing to considers. That was Donna Edwards. Now, that last phrase was a direct challenge to Chris Van Hollen, who was quoted by the Wall Street Journal in 2012 as saying, quote, "I'm willing to consider all of these ideas, Social Security and Medicare cuts being part of them, quote, as part of an overall plan." So I would say that Chris Van Hollen, who is progressive in some ways, is going to be trying to live down his support for Simpson-Bowles and its Social Security and Medicare cuts. Now, there is a concern in Maryland, I would say, that if Donna Edwards and Chris Van Hollen split the progressive vote, that a much more conservative Democratic candidate could come in. But Chris Van Hollen has some explaining to do. And that distinction that Donna Edwards has drawn between herself and Van Hollen is worth making. Here's why. Since the Bill Clinton era of what they called triangulation, a growing number of Democrats have been, quote unquote, willing to consider undermining the key programs of the New Deal, the New Frontier of John F. Kennedy, and the Great Society of Lyndon Baines Johnson, programs that include Medicare and Social Security. This is always unwise, and it is especially unwise in a time of soaring wealth inequality when these Democrats should be fighting instead to expand these programs. Now, look, we all understand that sometimes you got to compromise in politics. That is understood. But even as Republicans have become more extreme and further out of touch with the needs and wants of the people, some of these Democrats have been eager to sell themselves as deal makers with the Republicans rather than people who fight for what is right. That's why Donna Edwards' unequivocal stand on these programs like Social Security and Medicare is so important. This populist agenda, which includes fighting for Social Security and Medicare, fighting for jobs, fighting for infrastructure, fighting for better wages, it's not just good policy. As we are now learning, it's good politics too. Poll after poll after poll has shown that this agenda has the enthusiastic backing of voters all across the political spectrum. For example, large majorities of Republicans want to see Social Security expanded. I think it's 72% of Republicans, 90% of Democrats. So it's good politics. It's what these people ought to be fighting for. It's good policy. Let's end the stranglehold of conventional wisdom in Washington, D.C., and change the conversation as Donna Edwards is attempting to do in Maryland. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.